All right, so are you ready to dive into some seriously intriguing stuff with me today?
Always.
Okay, fantastic. Let's get right into it then. We're going deep into conspiracy theories today, specifically the supposed connection between the Illuminati and UFOs. You sent over a really fascinating collection of articles and theories, and honestly, some of them are out there, but that's what we do, right?
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
unpack these complex ideas, we take a look, and we see what we can learn.
I think what's really interesting about this is how persistent these theories are. It seems like anytime there's like an unexplained event or like major global politics shift, someone brings up the Illuminati or aliens are somehow involved.
Right, exactly. They've become like the go-to explanation for anything that we can't immediately wrap our heads around, right?
Yeah,
So to really get into this, let's start with this really interesting question that was posed in one of the articles. Could UFOs actually be a cover for the Illuminati's activities?
that's a great place to start because it forces us to look at both the history of these groups and the logic behind the theories that connect them.
Right, okay, so let's rewind the clock a little bit.
hmm
The Illuminati, shrouded in mystery, whispered about in hushed tones. They were founded in 18th century Bavaria by Adam Weishaupt, right?
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting. Their initial goals weren't about like world domination or summoning extraterrestrials or anything like that. They were actually quite progressive for their time. They were pushing for things like the separation of church and state, advocating for reason and critical thinking over blind faith. Some of the articles you sent even suggested that they were early champions of free speech
Right.
and secular education, concepts that we just take for granted now.
Wow, that's a far cry from the image of a shadowy cabal controlling the world from the shadows.
Sure.
But I guess that's part of what makes them so fascinating, right?
Right?
They've become this blank slate for people to project their fears and anxieties about power and control.
Exactly. And you can see how that projection easily extends to UFOs as well. Think about it. The idea of unknown objects in the sky, defying explanation, potentially harboring beings with technology far beyond our own.
Yeah.
It taps into that same sense of wonder and fear.
Yeah, they both represent the ultimate unknown. And when you combine those two, you get this like potent mix of intrigue and paranoia that fuels so many conspiracy theories.
Right. And the historical context is really key here. The Illuminatis were ultimately suppressed by authorities who felt threatened by their ideas. They officially disbanded in 1785. But that very act of suppression, of being forced underground, only added to their mystique. It fueled this idea that they continued to operate in secret, pulling strings from the shadows.
So their downfall is actually what made them perfect for conspiracy theories. It's
Right.
like they became a symbol of hidden power, right? Operating outside of the established order.
Precisely. And then you have the rise of modern UFO sightings. Kicking off with Kenneth Arnold's famous encounter near Mount Rainey in 1947, suddenly there's this wave of reports about unidentified objects in the sky, sparking widespread public fascination and speculation.
Right, and it's not just that there are sightings, it's the mystery surrounding them. The alleged cover-ups, the lack of clear explanations, the whispers of advanced technology being kept from the public. It creates like the perfect breeding ground for conspiracy theories.
Absolutely, and that's where the connection to the Illuminati comes in. Conspiracy theorists posit that the Illuminati, far from disappearing, have been using these unexplained phenomena to their advantage.
Okay, so let's get into like the nitty-gritty of some of these theories. One article suggests that the Illuminati might be using UFO sightings as a form of psychological manipulation. That sounds pretty intense. What does that mean exactly?
Well, the idea is that by orchestrating these sightings, or at least controlling the narrative around them, the Illuminati can keep the public in a state of fear and uncertainty. It's a classic tactic of control, right? If people are constantly worried about external threats, they're less likely to question the authority figures who claim to be protecting them.
So it's a distraction tactic, keeping us focused on the threat of aliens while the Illuminati continue their machinations behind the scenes.
Exactly. And the source material you provided even delves into some of the specific methods this manipulation might take. For instance, there's the idea that UFO sightings could be used to seed disinformation, to sow distrust in governments and scientific institutions.
Which would in turn make people more susceptible to the Illuminati's own propaganda and agenda.
Right. It's a pretty clever strategy if you think about it. Exploit people's natural curiosity about the unknown, then use that curiosity to manipulate their perceptions and beliefs.
Almost like a giant game of smoke and mirrors. You create this spectacle that everyone's talking about, but it's all just a distraction from what you're really up to.
And that ties into another interesting aspect of these theories: the alleged use of alien technology by the Illuminati.
Oh, yeah, that's where things get really wild. One article claims that the Illuminati are using advanced tech, gleaned from their extraterrestrial allies, to manipulate global events, from financial markets to political elections, basically pulling the strings of civilization from behind the scenes using tech we can't even comprehend. It all sounds a bit like a sci-fi movie, to be honest.
It does have that element of science fiction, but I think that's part of what makes it so appealing to some people. It provides a sense of order and control in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. If there's a secret group with advanced technology pulling the strings, then at least someone's in charge.
Right, so there's a weird comfort in believing that someone, even a shadowy organization, has a plan. But some of the theories go even further, suggesting that the Illuminatis are using alien tech to suppress even more groundbreaking technologies here on Earth. They're essentially holding back humanity's progress for their own gain.
That's a common theme in conspiracy theories, right? The idea of hidden knowledge and suppressed technology. It plays into this distrust of authority and the belief that we're not being told the whole truth.
Makes you wonder, if these theories are true, what kind of world could we be living in if we weren't being held back by these shadowy forces?
It's an intriguing thought experiment for sure. But of course, it's important to remember that we're dealing with speculation and conjecture here. There's no concrete evidence to support the claim that the Illuminatis are working with aliens or have access to their technology.
Right, and that's where that critical thinking muscle comes in. We need to be able to sift through these theories and separate the plausible from the purely fantastical. But let's talk about how some of these theories connect to real-world events. The source material you provided brings up some pretty well-known UFO incidents like Roswell and Rendlesham Forest. What's the connection there?
Well, those incidents are often cited as examples of the Illuminati's influence, either in orchestrating the events themselves or covering them up.
So like in the case of Roswell, the theory is that the government, under the direction of the Illuminati, recovered a crashed alien spacecraft and then went to great lengths to hide it from the public.
Exactly. And that alleged cover-up is seen as proof that the government is colluding with extraterrestrials, and by extension, the Illuminati. The Rendlesham Forest incident, with its multiple witnesses and intriguing details, is also often woven into this narrative.
It's interesting how these events, whether they have a mundane explanation or not, become fuel for the conspiracy theories. It's like every unexplained UFO sighting is another piece of evidence pointing to the Illuminati's hidden hand.
It speaks to the power of narrative and how we humans tend to look for patterns and connections even when they might not actually exist. We want to believe there's a reason, a purpose behind these events, and sometimes the simplest explanation that it's just a misidentified aircraft or a weather phenomenon isn't as satisfying as a grand conspiracy involving secret societies and aliens.
Right, and it's not just confined to like the fringes of the internet either. These ideas have seeped into popular culture, influencing movies, TV shows, music, even video games.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the X-Files, for example. It tapped into that fascination with government conspiracies and alien encounters, and in a way, helped to normalize those ideas for a wider audience.
Oh, I love that you brought up the X-Files. It's a perfect example of how these themes can be explored in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking. But I think it's important to acknowledge that while pop culture can be a powerful tool for exploring these ideas, it's not always an accurate reflection of reality. Just because something is in a movie or TV show doesn't mean it's based on fact.
That's a crucial point. It's easy to get caught up in the fictionalized portrayals of these topics and lose sight of the actual evidence, or lack thereof.
And speaking of evidence, that's something I wanted to touch on. While these theories are definitely captivating, the actual proof linking the Illuminati to UFOs is pretty thin, wouldn't you say?
That's an understatement. Most of the evidence presented by these theories is circumstantial at best, relying on conjecture, speculation, and interpretations of events that could have perfectly mundane explanations.
Oh. And while we're not here to debunk or discredit anyone's beliefs, I think it's important to approach these topics with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is essential here. We need to be able to assess the evidence, consider alternative explanations, and not jump to conclusions just because a theory sounds exciting or confirms our existing biases.
Right, and sometimes the simplest explanation really is the most likely one. But even if there isn't a grand conspiracy afoot, I think there's still a lot we can learn from exploring these ideas.
Absolutely. These theories, even the more outlandish ones, can teach us a lot about human psychology, our need for meaning and order, and our fascination with the unknown.
And they can also make us think critically about the information we consume. the sources we trust, and the narratives we buy into.
Exactly. It's all about developing that discernment, that ability to separate fact from fiction, evidence from speculation.
So even if we don't walk away from this discussion believing that the Illuminati are controlling UFOs to manipulate the world, we've gained valuable skills in analyzing information and forming our own conclusions.
And that, I think, is the ultimate goal of this deep dive, to empower you, the listener, with the knowledge and tools to navigate this complex world of information and ideas.
It's like we've given our listeners a mental decoder ring to help them kind of like decipher the world of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, precisely. We've gone through the historical roots, we've looked at the psychology behind these beliefs, we've examined the evidence, or the lack thereof, and now it's up to each listener to decide what they believe.
Exactly. And that's what I love about this whole process, right? It's not about telling people what to think, but giving them the tools to think for themselves.
Right, exactly. We've provided the context, we've given the analysis and the different perspectives. Now it's about empowering our listeners to draw their own conclusions.
And you know what? Maybe this has sparked a new interest in history for someone, or psychology, or even critical thinking.
That's the beauty of learning, right?
Yeah.
It opens up new avenues of inquiry, new ways of seeing the world.
Yeah, it's like we've planted a seed of curiosity, and who knows what kind of intellectual fruits it might bear.
Perhaps some of our listeners will be inspired to do their own research, to dig deeper into these topics and form their own informed opinions.
That would be amazing. That's what we hope for, right? To inspire a sense of wonder and a thirst for knowledge.
And remember, even if we don't have all the answers, the journey of exploration itself is incredibly valuable.
Well said. It's been an absolutely fascinating journey exploring these really complex ideas with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the Illuminati and UFOs. Keep those minds open, keep those questions coming, and those critical thinking skills sharp.
Until next time, keep exploring.